Hi guys, in this video I want to talk about how you can use a framework like Scrum and Kanban to prepare for the PMP Certification Exam. As you might be aware, the PMP exam now contains a high proportion of agile questions, so why not use an agile process to prepare for the exam? Now there are several advantages of using a framework like Scrum and Kanban to prepare for the exam. Number one, you will be able to keep track of your progress in a more organized way when using this framework. Secondly, you will be able to break down your entire preparation into shorter iterations. And finally, you will be able to evaluate and improve your performance using feedback. This way, you're going to be faster, systematic, and more strategic about exam preparation. However, before we dive into talking about how you can use these frameworks to prepare for the exam, I would like to welcome you to the Career Sprints YouTube channel. My name is Rohit and we like to produce videos that help you with your professional development and continuous learning. If this is the first time you've landed on this channel, I would like to give you a warm welcome and I hope you find the videos to be useful. If you do find the videos to be useful, please consider subscribing to the channel so that you get notified of all the future videos that we release. So without wasting any time, let's get started and see how you can use these frameworks to prepare for your exam. So let's look at how you can use this process to prepare for your PMP certification exam. Now I've made some basic assumptions here. My first assumption is that you're planning to get the certification within 1 or 2 months. Now 1 or 2 months is a reasonable time frame within which anyone can study and achieve this certification. My second assumption is that the length of a sprint is going to be 1 week. Now a sprint is also called an iteration, which is a limited span of time within which you will prepare for your PMP certification. When the sprint time box will end, your sprint will end. And if you're a busy professional who cannot devote an entire day or a week for preparation, you can choose to increase the sprint length to 2 weeks. However, I will recommend that you try to keep your sprints short for frequent reviews. Anything more than 2 weeks is going to be an overkill. Next, I'm going to assume that you can study for 2-3 hours every day or more if time permits. But definitely try to stick to 2-3 hours of studying every day. To really do some productive studying, you'll need to spend this time. And if you can't study every day, at least try to study on weekends. In that case, you must devote both days of the weekend to study if you cannot study at all during the weekdays. For weekend study, again, keep the sprint length to 2 weeks. Now, what I've done is that I've broken down the entire prep into a 4-week plan as shown on this slide. Every week, you're going to define a goal and you're going to work towards achieving that goal. So in week 1, you're going to start with the PMBOK 6th edition. As you might know, the PMBOK 6 is a major reference guide for the PMP exam, so studying this book is a must. Now, let's say you have signed up for an e-learning course where you're watching some videos. You will still have to stick to this plan. And in the first week, you're going to go through the first 6 chapters from the PMBOK. This is under the chapter of schedule management. You can open the book and you can see it for yourself. So if you've signed up for an e-learning course, you can watch the videos and then move on to skimming through the chapters from the PMBOK. And as you can see, if you're covering 6 chapters, you're mostly looking at doing 1 chapter a day. So a high level of focus is needed. As you work through the chapters, also remember to solve questions to test your understanding. Don't really worry about the score at this stage. Just go through the chapter, solve some questions, do an analysis of the wrong questions, and just move on. Now let's move on to week 2. In week 2, you're pretty much doing the same thing. You're just doing it for the next set of chapters, that is chapters 7 through 13. This is from cost management until stakeholder management. So again, watch the videos, skim through the chapter, solve questions, and do an analysis of the questions. Now pay attention to the word skimming the chapter. Skimming basically means going through the major points of the chapter or just reading through the chapter quickly just to gain an overall understanding of the chapter. It is very difficult to expect that you'll remember everything from that chapter. We will build your mental muscle of the major concepts from that chapter when we are going to solve questions. So just skim through the chapter and move on. But if your reading speed is good, you can definitely choose to read through the chapter as well. But if you're getting some assistance through some videos that you're watching from an e-learning course, just skim through the chapters at this stage. But more importantly, when you finish a chapter, try to solve at least 10 to 15 questions. When you solve 10 to 15 questions, you will get some understanding of what the exam questions are going to be like. One thing to understand is that while using a Scrum process to prepare, if you're able to accomplish your goal in a defined time frame, let's say 1 week, and you have some spare time, you can always pull new work from the upcoming sprint. So for example, if you finish a chapter earlier than expected, you can just start with the next chapter and you can move on to the next part of your preparation. And this basically brings us to the end of everything that you're going to look at from the PMBOK 6th edition. Now, when you're in week 3, we are going to move on to the Agile Practice Guide, which is another major book that you must refer for the PMP Certification Exam. The Agile Practice Guide, luckily, is a much shorter book than the PMBOK 6th edition, and you can wrap this up much faster. I've allotted 1 week of preparation from the Agile Practice Guide. The Agile Practice Guide primarily has 6 chapters, and you must go through all the 6 chapters from the book. Again, you will follow the same process. You will watch the videos if you're using an e-learning course. You will skim through the chapter from the Agile Practice Guide. You will solve questions and you will review your answers. So don't worry too much about your score yet. From whatever questions you solve in the test, don't really worry too much about your score. However, if you get a good score, that's good news. But even if you get an average score or a below average score, you will improve when you start solving more questions. So when you finish week 3, you pretty much should have the Agile Practice Guide out of the way, and you would have covered pretty much most of the portion for the PMP certification exam. The rest of the learning is going to happen by solving plenty of questions. So let's move on to week 4. In week 4, I recommend that you solve lots of questions. So this should be practice questions comprising of 50, 100 and then 180 questions. And we are doing more questions in each sitting. So for example, the first mock that you're doing, that's going to be 50 questions in one sitting. The second practice paper that you will do, that will have 100 questions. And then the third practice paper that you should do should have 180 questions. The basic idea here is that you solve fewer questions in the first instance, then you solve more questions in the second instance and more questions in the third instance, and so on and so forth, so that you are really able to build that stamina in the exam to solve so many questions. Now you must be thinking, why am I not recommending 180 questions right from the start? The thing is that to solve 180 questions, you need 3 to 4 hours, and for that you need a high level of concentration. And you may not have that because you may not have sat for a 4-hour exam in a long time. So I would recommend that you get there gradually. It's like trying to do push-ups. You will not do 40 push-ups in one single day, especially when it's your first day. You're going to get there to doing 40 push-ups gradually. But in total, I would say that towards the end of your preparation, you should solve at least 3 mocks, which are full practice papers of 180 questions. So 180 into 3 equals to 540 questions is what you would need to solve. And the other important thing is, whether you solve a 50 questions practice paper or 100 or 180 questions practice paper, you must do a thorough review of all the questions, both the ones that you get right and the ones that you get wrong. This is non-negotiable. And when you do the review, please ensure that you keep the PMBOK or the Agile Practice Guide open so that you are able to refer to those sections from the book from where the questions were given. Also, if you're doing these reviews with friends or in a group setting or with a trainer, that's even better because you can learn from other people. But even if you don't have anyone and you're doing it alone, it's okay. Now, what do I mean by a thorough review? A thorough review means that you're going to look at each answer option and understand why each option was right and the other options were wrong. When you do this, you will start seeing the gaps in your understanding and you can plug them by going through that concept or that chapter. Basically, in the final week, the 380 questions practice paper that you're doing must have situational questions and agile questions, and you must score at least 70% in these practice papers. A greater than 70% score is an indication that you are well prepared for the exam. Lastly, when you do questions, you'll also realize that some areas are weak. You just revise them by looking through those concepts and making some notes. Now, one thing to note is trying to accomplish the PMP in 4 weeks is a fairly aggressive plan, but it is achievable with a high amount of focus and commitment. So the whole idea here is that you do not take up any other projects during these 4 weeks. You need 100% focus for this exam. Also, it is very, very critical that you track progress. Now, as you can see, each of the weeks shown here on the slide basically represents a sprint. When the sprint ends, your work ends, and whatever you accomplished, you accomplished. What you did not accomplish, you're going to move it to the next sprint and you're going to do it in that sprint. But if you are able to finish a sprint earlier, that means you have a couple of days remaining in the sprint. You can always pull work from the upcoming sprint, take it in the current sprint, and try to finish that work in the current sprint as well. And if you're booking your exam, my recommendation would be to book it 5 weeks out instead of 4, since you want to keep at least a week extra for unforeseen circumstances, or you may even fall behind in your schedule. So you want to have that extra week. And in the 5th week, you just solve more questions, you do 1 or 2 extra mocks, you review your answers, and you keep filling the gaps and you keep revising the concepts just to ensure that you are really, really well prepared for the exam. Now that we've designed our high-level release plan and we have a fair understanding of what you're going to do sprint by sprint, we will now look at how you can systematically track the progress of the work that you're doing in the sprint on a Kanban board, and you will be able to track progress on a daily basis and see what you're accomplishing and what is remaining and what needs to change for you to be able to hit your plan. So guys, here is my Kanban board. I've used a software called Trello for this, but you can also use another software if you want, or you can also use something more tactile or tangible, like using a physical Kanban board. Just remember that if you're using a physical board, you will need some cardboard, you will need some sticky notes so that you can build your physical Kanban board, and you'll also need some tape, or you can just draw lines on your cardboard and you can build your Kanban board. So the idea of building a Kanban board is that you're able to track your work visually. So if you remember earlier, I had explained how you can plan your work in the manner of sprints. So you had week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, which was your sprints. And here we are building our Kanban board and trying to track the work that we are going to do visually. So my project is called Achieve PMP Certification, but my primary goal is to prepare and be able to write the exam. So here on this board, I have assumed that you have probably done some primary research related to your PMP certification, and now you're going to do the application. After your application is approved, you're going to prepare for the exam, and then you're going to eventually write the exam. So this entire board is going to enable you to track all the work that you would be doing to get to the end of achieving the PMP certification. So as you can see, I have 4 columns here. One column is called the project backlog. Then I have the to do column, the doing column, and the done column. The project backlog primarily serves as my overall backlog for the release, which is to achieve the PMP certification. And I have created these user stories, or in Trello language, it's called a card. And you can basically create these cards, and these cards represent individual pieces of work. So there are individual pieces of work related to preparation using the PM Box 6. There are individual pieces of work related to the Agile Practice Guide, and so on and so forth. So the way you can add a card to this board is just by clicking on Add Card, and you can enter some information there. I'm not going to do that, but you can just enter the information and click on Add Card, and the information would get captured. The other thing is that once you create your card, you can also open a card, and if you've created any labels, you can also use these labels on the card. So it's fairly simple to actually create these cards on a Trello board. It's just a regular software that allows you to work on the cloud. So like I said earlier, on my project backlog, I have these different cards, and each card represents a user story or a backlog item. Basically, it could represent a chapter, or it could represent any piece of work that I would like to do for my PMP exam preparation. And one of the good things about using a Trello board is that you can also move the cards up or down. So as you can see, I can always move a card from the bottom to the top or from the top to the bottom. And the way we work when we use Scrum or Kanban is that when we are creating a backlog, we generally try to arrange our backlog in priority order. So all the items that are of high priority, they are going to sit at the top of the backlog, and all the items that we are going to pick up in the next sprint, that is which we are going to do immediately in the upcoming sprint, they are also going to sit at the top. And as you might have noticed that I have also created some labels. So it's very simple to create labels. You would see that there are some colors that are given, and you can just click on edit and you can write whatever it is that you want on the label, and you can save it. So I'm not going to create this label because I already created labels. And the idea of creating labels is that you will be able to categorize the different kinds of work that you're doing. So for instance, I have chapters that I need to prepare related to the PM Box 6. I have work that I need to do related to filling out my PMP application. I have work or chapters that I need to study from the Agile Practice Guide. And I have also created another category called Final Preparation, where all the work related to my last week of preparation or the end of my preparation would be grouped under Final Preparation. And you would notice that I have also created another label called blocked. This means that my work is blocked, or my work is obstructed, or my work is impeded for any reason whatsoever. And we will see an example of where work could be blocked, but having that label would enable you to also understand what work needs to be pushed forward and you're not able to push it forward for whatever reason. So as you can see, I have my project backlog where I have all the items that are related to my release. Then I have a to-do column. So the to-do column basically represents my sprint backlog. So the to-do, the doing, and the done is related to sprint 1. But similarly, you can have a to-do, a doing, and a done column for sprint 2 and sprint 3 and sprint 4 and so on and so forth. So what typically is going to happen is that as I begin a sprint, I'm just going to pull work from my project backlog into my sprint backlog. So as you can see, I have just moved the cost management story from my project backlog to my to-do column. So the basic idea is that when I begin my sprint, I'm going to pull something from the backlog into my sprint. Then as I start working on that item, so let's say I start working on integration management, I'm going to pull it to the done column. And as I finish working on that chapter from integration management, I'm going to move it to my done column. And you can see that there is some celebration also happening when I am able to accomplish some work, but I'm just going to pull it back for the time being to the previous column. So pretty much you can move any item up or down, or you can move it from one column to another column. So as you can see, this is an interesting, it's a fun visual way of working, and it also will help you really keep track of what you've done and what you've not done. Imagine if you're a busy professional, you studied something last week, you probably are not even going to remember properly what you exactly studied. You may have some faint idea, but this will really help you track your work very, very well. So I've also created something known as a done criteria. So let me just explain what is a done criteria. So done is a criteria that is used in the world of Agile, or if you've read the Scrum guide, you would realize that they have something known as a definition of done. Basically, a definition of done is a concept in Agile where the product backlog items must meet or adhere to some sort of done criteria or quality criteria. It is, you can think of this as a checklist to assess the completeness of the work. So for instance, I've created a done criteria for all the chapters that I'm studying. So let's say I'm doing a chapter on cost management or integration management, or chapter from even the Agile Practice Guide. This is the criteria that I have created. You can create your own criteria, but the criteria that I have is, for instance, if I'm using an e-learning course to prepare for my PMP certification, so I must have watched all the e-learning videos. I must have made notes while watching those videos. I should have also read through the chapter from the PM book or from the Agile Practice Guide when I was after I watched those videos. Then I have at least solved 20 questions from that chapter, and I have scored 70% at least in these tests. And I have done a root cause analysis of my correct as well as my incorrect answer. So this is a done criteria that I've defined, which means that for every product backlog item,
I am going to ensure that it meets my done criteria. So whether I do cost management or integration management or scope management or schedule management, I need to ensure that my done criteria is met. This way I would know that I have a certain level of preparation and I've done at least some basic groundwork related to a particular chapter. Now the next thing I want to talk about is a blocked item. So you might be aware that for the PMP exam, you need to write an application. Now, once you write an application, sometimes applications come in an audit, sometimes applications also are asked for further information, or sometimes applications also get rejected. So the idea is that if an item is blocked, you can label the item. So I have submitted my PMP application, but currently I'm waiting for an approval from PMI for my application, or maybe my application is going through an audit. So I can either create more stories related to my audit. So I can say submit requirements of PMI for the PMP application audit. I can create a story, or I can also call it blocked, and I can add some description saying why is it blocked and what do I need to do to ensure that my application is approved and I'm able to move forward. So using labels is a great way to be able to categorize or classify your work. So definitely try to use some basic labels. You see, the advantage of using a system like this is that you are also working with the system when you're preparing for the exam, and the exam is anyways going to test you on it. So why not use a system like this to prepare for the exam? You will also learn how to use an agile board. This will probably help you with other tasks as well that you probably would be doing in your company, or even if you go for an interview, at least you have some hands-on experience of using an actual Kanban board. And another thing to realize is that as you prepare, some new requirements might emerge. For instance, some concepts in a chapter might not be very clear to you. So what you can do is that you can create a card for them like this, and you can track that card. So creating a card like this can also enable you to keep a track of what is that you need to do related to a specific chapter. Now, the next thing is that you can also look at this board daily. So let's say if you're not going to office or you're working from home and you did decide to dedicate 2-3 hours every day to study, every time before you study, you can open the board and you can just have a quick glance at it and see where you are currently sitting, what you've done, what you've not done. So you can either do this in the morning, or like I said, you can do it at any time during the day. This kind of becomes your daily stand-up meeting where you are inspecting and adapting your progress on a daily basis. And finally, when you are reaching the end of the sprint, what you can do is that you can move all the items that you have accomplished to the column. Just ensure that whatever work you're doing, you are meeting the done criteria. Because if you're not meeting the done criteria, then it's kind of half-baked work and it's not really adding a significant amount of value to you. So definitely try to build your own done criteria, and I've given you some examples here too. So you can use the done criteria that I have on my card. So this is where it's written in the description, so you can just look at it, and this will just help you be more systematic about doing your preparation. And then when you are finally finished with sprint 1, what you can do is that you can just create another list and you can call it done for sprint 1, and you can just change the names of your to do, your doing, and your done column to sprint 2. So basically what's happening is that you're tracking all the work of the current sprint, that is of sprint 2, using the to do, doing, and the done column, and all the item that was done in sprint 1, it is just shown here at the end of sprint 1. And similarly, once you're done with sprint 2, you can create a done column for sprint 2. So basically when you work in this way, you will be able to track everything on the same board. So I think it's a fun way to work. It's visual as well, it's a little colorful. And definitely this will enable you to be more systematic and strategic about preparing and achieving your PMP certification and learning some agile along the way too. So this is just an example of a Kanban board that you can use for PMP exam preparation.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please do hit the like button. When you hit the like button, YouTube will recommend this video to other PMP candidates who can benefit from the information covered in this video. And please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. When you subscribe to the channel, you will get notified of all future videos from us. and I wish you good luck with your PMP exam preparation.